In the gentle hush of twilight, when the sky was brushed with strokes of lavender and gold, a soft wind whispered through the tall grass of the hills. It wasn't a loud wind, nor a proud one. It carried no thunder, no storm. Instead, it moved like a lullaby, flowing through the trees, around the stones, and across the quiet earth, with the softness of a mother's breath upon her sleeping child. In a small village nestled between hills and streams, there lived a young woman named Eliora. Her name meant God is my light, and her soul had long searched for the kind of peace that sleep alone could not offer. Each night she lay beneath her window, listening to the distant rustle of leaves, hoping that the sound would carry her away into rest. But sleep was a stranger to her, and rest was a distant shore. Eliora's days were gentle, filled with the tending of sheep and the quiet prayers of her heart. Yet her nights were troubled by dreams that never quite let her go. She would awaken with tears upon her cheeks, longing for something she could not name, something lost long ago. One evening, as the stars blinked their soft light into the sky, she wandered out beyond the pastures, drawn by a sound she couldn't quite place. It was the wind, but not like any she had heard before. It seemed to call her by name. Eliora, it breathed, tender as a hymn. Come and rest. Her heart stilled. She turned toward the sound and followed. The path led her to a grove of ancient olive trees, their trunks gnarled and wise with age. Moonlight filtered through their branches like silver rain. There in the center stood a stone well. It was old, covered in moss, and surrounded by wild lavender. The wind circled it like a guardian. Eliora approached, feeling the weight of her years fall away with every step. She touched the stone and closed her eyes. A warmth wrapped around her, not of this world, yet more real than anything she had ever known. She heard no voice, yet words bloomed in her spirit. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. She wept, not from sorrow, but from release. Every tight place in her soul loosened. Her breath slowed. The well did not hold water, but something deeper, a peace that surpassed understanding. And there, beneath the whispering wind and the gaze of the eternal stars, Eliora lay down in the grass, curled like a lamb, and slept. For the first time in many years, she dreamed not of what was lost, but of what was found. She saw a garden, vast and green, where rivers sparkled like laughter and fruit hung heavy with joy. In the center was a tree with leaves of gold, and beside it, a figure clothed in light who simply opened his arms. She ran to him, and he whispered as the wind once did, "Welcome home." The morning rose not with a shout, but with a hush. The kind of silence that speaks louder than thunder. A soft golden light spilled over the hills, gently waking the flowers and coaxing the dew to glisten like scattered pearls. Birds lifted their morning hymns, each note a thread in the fabric of peace that wrapped the earth. Eliora stirred beneath the olive trees, her breath slow and even, her face soft with the serenity of true rest. For the first time in years, she had not wrestled the night like a storm. She had floated through it like a feather in a sacred current. When her eyes opened, they met the sky with wonder. She sat up slowly, her heart still echoing with the dream. The garden, the tree, the figure in light. She pressed her hand to her chest and whispered, "Was it real?" But even as the question left her lips, something within her answered, "Yes." Her steps led her back through the pasture, but the path felt different now. Each stone seemed to remember her touch. Each blade of grass bowed gently as she passed. The wind, her quiet companion, followed close behind. It no longer called her forward, but walked beside her, like an old friend. At the edge of the village, an old shepherd stood waiting. His face was creased with years of sun and story, his eyes like wells filled with the memory of the mountains. He held a staff shaped by time, not carved by man, and when he saw Eliora, he smiled, not with surprise, but with knowing. "I saw you walk the path last night," he said, his voice low and steady. "The wind told me." Eliora blinked. "You heard it too?" The shepherd nodded. "The wind only speaks to those who are ready to listen. It carries the breath of the one who never sleeps." She felt tears gather at the corners of her eyes, not from sadness, but from the beauty of being understood. "I dreamed," she began, and the shepherd held up a hand. "You saw the garden, And the one who waits in its heart. She nodded. The shepherd looked to the sky, his gaze distant. He calls to many, but few answer. The journey is long, and the world loud. But those who walk his path never walk alone. From beneath his cloak, he drew a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Inside lay a simple loaf of bread and a flask of water. He placed them in her hands. "You will need these," he said, "for the path is narrow, and though peace has found you, it must now take root." Eliora looked down at the gift, then back at the man. "Where does the path lead?" He smiled, eyes twinkling like morning stars. "To still waters, to pastures where fear cannot follow. But first, through the valleys." She nodded, not with fear, but with faith. As she walked away, the village behind her and the wind at her back, Eliora felt something shift within her. The burdens she had carried so long now felt like feathers. She did not know where each step would lead, but she trusted the one who guided her feet. And far behind, from the shadow of the olive trees, the wind stirred again. Not loud, not proud, only faithful. "He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul." The road beneath Eliora's feet turned from soft grass to a path of quiet earth, worn smooth by the steps of many pilgrims who had come before her. Each footprint, now long faded, had once belonged to a soul seeking rest, some with sorrow, some with song. The wind that had guided her so far was now a hush at her shoulder, like a lullaby too sacred to speak aloud. The sun was warm on her back, but before her lay a valley cloaked in mist. Not a frightening mist, but a gentle one, as if the heavens themselves had stooped low to veil the way with mercy. She paused at its edge. The air was still here, the kind of stillness that listens. Trees lined the path, their branches outstretched like arms in quiet prayer. Somewhere a stream whispered through stones, its voice like comfort spoken in a language only the soul could understand. Eliora stepped into the mist. Immediately the sounds of the world grew soft, as if wrapped in wool. Each step she took echoed only in her heart. Memories stirred, old griefs, buried fears, the ache of years spent longing. But instead of being overwhelmed, she felt as though the valley was holding these things gently, like a father rocking his child. Then came the shadows, not dark, not menacing, but soft silhouettes that moved beside her like old friends. One of them took the shape of a child. Her breath caught. She remembered that face. The little brother who had slipped away into the arms of the divine before he'd learned to walk. Another shadow showed her mother, who had always sung to the stars before she, too, faded like a candle at dawn. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The silence between them was full of love, and Eliora felt no fear. The shadows did not haunt her. They blessed her. They reminded her that in every sorrow, a thread of light had been sown. That grief, when carried in the hands of the beloved, could become the softest blanket of peace. Tears came again, but they were not bitter. They were warm, cleansing, healing. And in the center of the valley, where the mist was thickest, she saw a figure, clothed in white, with eyes like morning after rain. He stood still, and yet everything in creation seemed to move around him. When he looked at her, the weight of her soul lifted. "Do not be afraid," he said, and his voice was both thunder and lullaby. "I am with you." Eliora fell to her knees, not out of fear, but from the overwhelming sense of being truly seen. In his presence, all masks fell away. She was not just Eliora the shepherdess. She was Eliora, beloved daughter of the Most High, called by name, cradled by eternity. He reached out and touched her cheek. His hand was warm, and where it rested, all sorrow melted like frost under the morning sun. "You do not walk this valley alone," he whispered. "Even here, especially here, I am with you." And just like that, the mist began to part. The shadows faded, leaving behind a trail of light. Eliora stood, her spirit quieter than it had ever been. She looked back once, not with longing, but with love, and then stepped forward into the light. The valley was behind her now, but its comfort would remain forever in her heart. The valley faded behind Eliora like a dream upon waking, but the peace it gave her lingered in her bones, quiet and deep. Her feet found the path again, dusty, sun-warmed, lined with wildflowers that bowed in the breeze as though in reverence. The wind had returned, soft and slow, like a breath remembering a song. Ahead, nestled between two gentle hills, was a glade so still it seemed to float above the earth. In its heart, water welled up from the stone, a spring so clear it mirrored the heavens. The surface shimmered like glass, and the trees that circled it leaned in, as if listening to something sacred. Eliora approached with reverent steps. Her heart, tender from the valley, beat slowly now, like the hush before prayer. She knelt beside the spring, cupping her hands to drink. The water was cool, and as it passed her lips, it filled more than her body. It filled the ache in her soul. Memories came to her, not as burdens, but as blessings. She remembered the day she first prayed aloud as a child, her voice small, her words simple. "Are you there?" And now, so many years later, she knew the answer had always been yes. Every silent evening, every tear in the night, every lonely dawn, he had been there waiting, loving, weeping with her. A still, small voice rose within her. "You are not forgotten. You are not forsaken. You are not alone." She wept again, as she had in the grove. But these were tears of grace, the kind that washed away shame, not just sorrow. The kind that carved rivers through the heart and made it ready for new life. As the tears fell, the spring beside her rippled, and from its center rose light. Not blinding, not burning, but glowing like the first candle lit in a dark sanctuary. Within it, she saw reflections, not of herself, but of a garden vast and eternal. The same garden from her dream, where rivers of joy sang through the trees and laughter grew like fruit. She heard again the echo of sacred words. "With joy you will draw water from the wells of salvation." A presence settled beside her. She did not need to look. She knew. He was here again, the one who had met her in the mist, who walked through shadows and knew every silent ache of the human soul. He spoke, and his voice was like still waters in roaring seas, both gentle and unshakable. Grace is not a reward. It is a gift, freely given, freely received. Eliora bowed her head, overcome. "But I am unworthy." "You are beloved," he replied, "and that is enough." A warmth surged through her, not of fire, but of mercy. It wrapped her like a shawl, woven of compassion, patience, and forgiveness. The water at the wellspring sparkled brighter, and for a moment, the veil between worlds grew thin. She saw the garden again, closer now, and the tree of life, and the figure of light with arms always open. A home not just promised, but present. Then the vision faded. The glade remained. The spring flowed on. Eliora rose, filled with something she had never known before. Grace that overflowed, that could not be earned or measured, only received and shared. The path awaited, but now her steps would carry more than her body. They would carry blessing, poured out like water from the well. The sky was shifting when Eliora left the glade. Day had softened into twilight again, the hour when shadows lengthen, but light still clings to the earth with a quiet stubbornness. The hush of the land deepened, and with each step she took, the stillness seemed to wrap around her like a mantle woven of silence and sacred things. The path narrowed, threading between tall cypress trees. Their dark branches whispered high above, murmuring like ancient monks in prayer. Eliora's footsteps made no sound on the pine needle floor. Her soul felt both weightless and full, as though grace had taken root within her and begun to bloom. Ahead, a flicker of light drew her eyes. It pulsed gently in the gathering dusk, a lantern swinging on a post at the edge of a hill. And beyond it, more lights, faint, golden, steady, lining a ridge like stars fallen from heaven and laid upon the earth. She followed them. At the top of the hill stood a small stone tower, old and round, weathered by time but not broken. Around it were smaller shelters, huts made of wood and thatch. In each one, a lamp glowed through the window. The air smelled of oil and olive wood, smoke and sweet herbs. A man stood outside the tower, tall and wrapped in a cloak of midnight blue. He held a staff carved with winding patterns, and on his shoulder sat a small white bird, still and watchful. He turned as Eliora approached, and his eyes, gray like river stone, met hers with knowing. "Welcome, traveler," he said, voice deep as the hills. "You walk the shepherd's path." Eliora nodded, though she wasn't sure how he knew. "I follow the wind and the voice in my heart," he smiled gently. "Then you walk in good company." He beckoned her toward the tower. "Come, it is the hour of the watchman." Inside, the tower was round and quiet, lit by dozens of oil lamps set into alcoves on the walls. Each one burned with a steady flame. The floor was stone, and the air was filled with a peace so deep it almost sang. Around the room stood others, men and women, old and young. Some were kneeling, some standing in silence. A few wept softly, but not from grief. All held small lamps in their hands. "These are the watchers," the man said, his voice hushed with reverence. "They keep vigil through the night. They pray for the sleepers, for the wanderers, for those who have lost their way. Their light keeps the darkness from swallowing the path." Elira's breath caught. Her soul trembled with something like awe. May I join them?" she asked. He did not answer with words. Instead, he handed her a small lamp, already lit. Its flame flickered once, then steadied. As she held it, warmth surged through her hands and into her chest. She felt herself anchored, no longer drifting through sorrow, but standing firm in a current of something holy. One of the watchers approached, an old woman with hair like snow and eyes like deep wells. She touched Eliora's hand. "Every light matters," she whispered. "Yours will help someone find their way home." They stood in silence, their lamps glowing. The hours passed not with haste, but with quiet purpose. Outside, the wind stirred again, lifting prayers like leaves into the sky. Eliora closed her eyes. The voice came again, not from within, not from outside, but from somewhere deeper still. "You are a light set upon a hill. Do not be afraid to shine." And in that moment, she knew. This night watch was not the end of the journey. It was the heart of it. In stillness, she would stand. In silence, she would shine. Not for her own sake, but for the ones still lost in the dark. She would keep the flame. The stars were still awake when Eliora stepped from the tower. The lamps of the watchmen glowed behind her like sacred embers in the night. She held her own lamp close, shielding its small but steady flame as the wind played gently at her cloak. She felt changed, not in a way the world might notice. Not taller, not stronger, not visibly radiant. But inside, something had shifted. A quiet light now lived within her, echoing the flame she carried. It pulsed not with pride, but with promise. At the edge of the hill, a man waited beside a wooden cart. He wore robes of earth brown and sky gray, and his eyes were kind. The cart was filled with small candles, each wrapped in linen and tied with a single strand of golden thread. "You're ready," he said softly. Eliora looked at him, puzzled. "For what?" He motioned to the cart. "To carry the light. These candles are for the pilgrims who've lost their way in the wilderness, those wandering between grief and hope." "You will take them." She hesitated. "But I don't know where they are." He smiled. "The wind does." And then Eliora understood. Her steps had never been her own alone. She was part of something larger, something sacred and unseen. She took the cart's handle and began walking. The forest path opened before her like a page turned by gentle hands. She moved with the hush of dawn, her lamp swaying gently, the cart wheels whispering over roots and stone. Birds sang in soft tones, and the earth felt alive beneath her feet. The first pilgrim she met was a woman curled beside a fallen tree, her eyes red with sorrow. "I've lost my child," she whispered. "I've lost the way." Eliora knelt beside her and placed a candle in her hand. "This flame is for you," she said gently. "It will not take the pain away, but it will light your steps." The woman wept and clutched the candle to her chest as if it were something sacred. Perhaps it was. The next was a young man, trembling beneath a broken bridge. "I failed," he said. "I don't deserve the road ahead." Eliora sat beside him and gave him a candle. "This light does not ask what you've done. It only asks that you keep going." All through the day and into the soft hours of dusk, Eliora walked. She found pilgrims on mountain paths, by silent streams and beneath weeping willows. To each she gave a candle and a word, not of her own, but something deeper that rose through her like breath from the earth. You are not alone. There is still a way. Even in silence, you are seen. And when night came again, Eliora found herself at the edge of a quiet field. The stars returned to their watch, and her cart was nearly empty. She looked behind her and gasped. Across the hills and valleys, scattered like a map only heaven could read, were points of light, small flames flickering in the hands of those she had met. They glowed in the night like constellations upon the ground, a sky turned upside down. She fell to her knees, and the wind whispered once more. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. In the silence, Eliora wept, not for sorrow, but for wonder. Her own lamp still burned, and so did her heart. She knew now that her journey would not always be easy, but it would always be lit. Morning came not with noise, but with light. Soft, golden light that crept through the branches like a whisper of heaven. Dew clung to the grass like blessings waiting to be noticed, and birds sang with a hush, as if they too were in prayer. Eliora rose from where she had slept beneath an ancient cedar, her lamp still warm beside her. The cart, now empty save for her own light, rested quietly. She knew it was time to return it, though it felt more like releasing a part of herself. She followed the path eastward, toward the hills where the sun broke open the sky. As she walked, she recalled the faces of those she had given candles to. She remembered the tears, the trembling hands, the silence, and more than that, she remembered the way their eyes had changed when the flame touched their skin. It was never loud, never dramatic, just a flicker, a breath, a beginning. Eliora thought of her own beginnings too, the sleepless nights, the ache in her chest that had once felt endless, and how in the olive grove, something eternal had whispered, "Come and rest." She smiled gently to herself, her steps slow and reverent. By midday, the path narrowed and curved around a hill cloaked in wild thyme and daisies. And there, tucked between two ancient stones, stood a gate. It was not grand. No golden hinges or guards in armor, just two weather-worn posts and a door of vine-covered wood with a handle shaped like a tree branch. Yet as Eliora approached, her breath caught. The air here felt different. It hummed, not with sound, but with presence, as though the space itself was aware, watching her with the kind of love that asked nothing in return. She reached out and touched the handle. It was warm, as if it had been waiting for her. The moment she stepped through, the world changed. The garden on the other side stretched out like a song. Tall trees arched toward the heavens, their leaves shimmering like silver scripture. Flowers bloomed in colors that words could never capture, hues that felt like memories of joy and whispers of peace. A river ran through the garden, clear as crystal and smooth as silence. It made no sound, but when Eliora looked into it, she saw glimpses, not of herself, but of truth. A child laughing beneath the sun, a mother's hands, a lamb resting in stillness, a tree whose fruit tasted of mercy. And then she saw him, the figure she had dreamed of, the one clothed in light. He stood beside the river with arms open, not in command, but in welcome. His face was not hidden, yet it did not overwhelm. It comforted. His eyes were stars and sea and the beginning of every good thing. Eliora's knees gave way, and she knelt in the grass. He did not speak, yet she heard him clearly. You were never alone. Tears streamed down her face. The ache that had once been endless was now a cup, filled to the brim with something holy. She wanted to stay, but even in that moment, she knew she would return to the world beyond the gate. The light was not meant to be hoarded. He reached out, and in his hand was a small seed, glowing faintly with light. She took it without question, holding it as gently as a breath. "Plant this where the ground is dry," he whispered, "and it will become shelter." Eliora stood, the seed in her palm, her lamp by her side. The garden was not a destination, it was a beginning. And as she turned to leave, the wind rose again, not harsh but faithful. It carried with it the scent of jasmine and a promise. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow you all the days of your life. Eliora walked back through the gate with the seed held close to her heart. The light of the garden clung to her like morning mist, and though her steps touched the earth, her spirit floated somewhere between heaven and home. She journeyed for many days following no map, only the quiet urging in her chest that whispered, "Go where the land thirsts." The hills grew less green, the streams fewer. Trees gave way to scrub, and eventually to dust. Yet the stillness in Eliora remained unbroken. The peace she carried was no longer something she chased. It was a companion, steady as breath. Then she came upon it. A valley stretched before her, cracked and wide, its soil split by sun and sorrow. Not a blade of grass dared rise. Rocks jutted out like broken bones, and the wind moaned low like a lament. Eliora stood at the edge and looked down. She saw no life, but she remembered the seed. Gently she descended into the dry belly of the earth. Each step echoed against the silence, not loud, but holy. She passed what once might have been streams and now were only scars. She passed thorn bushes dried into ash, and a tree, bare and brittle, yet still standing, like a prayer whispered by someone who had forgotten the words. She knelt at the base of that tree and pressed her hand to the soil. It was hot, barren, unforgiving, but the seed did not flinch in her hand. She remembered his voice. "Plant this where the ground is dry, and it will become shelter." And so, with fingers slow and reverent, she dug a small hollow and laid the glowing seed within. She covered it gently and placed her lamp beside it. Then, with the last of the water she had, she poured a single drop onto the soil. The earth did not tremble. The skies did not open. Nothing happened, not to the eyes. But Eliora closed hers and listened. And deep beneath her skin, beneath the ground, beneath time, she felt it. Life. It was slow, quiet, unseen, but it was there. She sang then, not with words but with her spirit, a hymn from childhood, a lullaby of hope, a melody her mother once hummed as she braided her hair, long ago before the dreams turned to ache, and the wind, once mournful, listened. That night, Eliora slept curled beneath the empty tree, though it no longer felt empty. And in her dreams, the valley was no longer dry. Flowers crept like miracles across the soil. Springs bubbled where there had been cracks, and people came, carrying burdens, stories, silence. They sat beneath a new tree, its branches thick with grace, its fruit sweet with mercy. And above them, a voice whispered, "The wilderness will rejoice and blossom. Like the crocus, it will burst into bloom." Eliora awoke with tears on her cheeks, but they were not tears of sadness. They were the dew of a promise kept. She rose, gathered her lamp, and continued walking. Behind her, the seed slept in the earth. But one day it would rise, and someone would find shelter beneath its leaves. The road ahead shimmered in the morning light as Eliora moved beyond the dry valley. Her lamp still glowed faintly, though its flame seemed now to burn not with fire, but with memory. Behind her, the valley rested, its seed tucked safely into the earth like a promise buried in time. The path took her through a forest not marked on any map. Its trees stood close, their trunks tall and silent, their leaves whispering songs too old for language. Sunlight dripped like honey through the branches, and the air smelled of cedar and wild thyme. Eliora slowed her steps. Here the silence was not empty, it was sacred. She came to a clearing where a single stone bench lay nestled beneath an ancient oak. Beside it sat a man wrapped in a shawl of woven gold and green, his back straight, his hands resting atop a wooden lyre. He looked neither young nor old, only eternal. Eliora approached quietly. The man looked up and smiled as though he had been waiting. "Welcome, Eliora," he said, his voice like a stream over smooth stones. "I am the keeper of songs." She sat beside him, and for a time they said nothing. The wind moved around them, gentle and warm. Birds trilled soft melodies, and the trees leaned in as if listening. At last, the man spoke. "Every soul carries a song," he said. "Some forget theirs, some silence it, but none ever lose it, not truly. Would you like to hear yours?" Eliora's hands trembled in her lap. "Yes," she whispered. The keeper touched his lyre, and it began to hum, not like an instrument, but like a heart awakening. Then from the strings a melody poured out, not grand or loud, but tender. It rose like mist from the earth, winding around her like arms that had long been waiting to embrace. As the song played, Eliora remembered. She saw herself as a child, singing by candlelight while her father mended fishing nets. She saw her mother brushing her hair, humming the same lullaby each night. She saw a boy she once loved, whose laughter made her feel like spring. She saw her grief, her fear, the nights she thought God had turned his face away. And yet in every moment she heard her song, a thread unbroken, though she had once believed it lost. When the music ceased, she found tears on her cheeks. "You were never abandoned," the keeper said gently. "You only stopped listening." Eliora bowed her head. "But now," he continued, placing the lyre in her hands, "your song is yours again. Keep it, share it, let it remind others of their own." "I don't know how to play," she said, voice trembling. He smiled. "You do. You always have." Eliora held the lyre close. Its wood was warm, its strings weighted. The keeper rose and began to walk back into the forest, his figure fading into golden light. As he disappeared, his voice floated back on the breeze. "The Lord your God will rejoice over you with singing." Eliora stayed a while longer in the clearing, playing softly, learning her song again by heart. And when she left, she no longer feared the silence, for now she could feel it. The forest faded behind her as Eliora walked toward the sound of flowing water. The melody of the lyre she now carried seemed to echo the rhythm of her footsteps, and each note felt like a heartbeat, a quiet reminder that she was still on the path, still held by something greater than herself. She passed through tall reeds and flowering myrtle until she came upon a wide, slow-moving river. Its waters gleamed like liquid glass, reflecting not only the sky above, but the soul of all who approached. This was no ordinary river. It was the river of remembering. A stone footbridge arched gently over it, carved with ancient symbols Eliora did not recognize, yet somehow understood. As she stepped onto the bridge, she looked down and gasped. The river didn't reflect her outer image. It showed her memories flowing slowly beneath her feet like scenes in a dream. She saw herself as a child again, laughing, skipping rocks across a stream, her father calling to her with love in his eyes. She saw the first night she prayed alone, the trembling of her voice, the flicker of faith. She saw the day her mother died. Tears welled up as the image surfaced. The quiet house, the silence that settled like dust, the unanswered questions, the ache, the emptiness. But then the water shifted. She saw a moment she had forgotten, herself at the window weeks later, whispering a broken prayer in the sudden wind that had lifted the curtain. A feeling of peace had come then, fleeting but real. She hadn't known what it was. Now she did. He had been with her, even then. A voice beside her said, "Many walk this bridge and see only pain, but the river remembers more than sorrow." Eliora turned. An old woman stood beside her, robed in a shawl that shimmered like mist. Her face was lined with years, but her eyes were young, full of knowing. "Who are you?" Eliora asked softly. "I am called Mara by some," the woman said, "but long ago I was known as Naomi. I carry memory, not just mine, but the memory of all who pass through sorrow and find hope again." Eliora looked back down at the water. The river now showed the olive grove, the ancient well, the shepherd's smile, the keeper's song. "It's all one story," Eliora murmured, "every joy and every ache." The woman nodded. "And you, beloved one, are part of it. The author has not left a single word of your life unwritten. Even the pages soaked in tears are sacred." Eliora placed her hand over her heart. "How do I carry all of this?" "You don't carry it alone," the woman said, touching Eliora's shoulder gently. "The one who walks beside you also walks within you." The river quieted, the scenes faded, and once again it looked like a gentle stream under a bright sky. Eliora stepped off the bridge, her soul somehow both heavy and light. As she turned to go, the woman called out, "Remember, child of light, your story is not only remembered, it is redeemed." Eliora nodded, her eyes full, her spirit calm. She walked on, and behind her, the river sang. The path turned sandy and dry as Eliora left the river behind. The air grew warmer, and the green trees gave way to low shrubs and quiet stones. Though she no longer heard the river's song, a deeper stillness settled around her, a silence that wasn't empty, but full, like breath held in prayer. The wilderness was wide. Rolling dunes stretched into the distance, broken only by the occasional thorn bush or flowering cactus. The sun was soft, veiled by clouds, and Eliora walked without fear. She remembered the old scriptures whispered in the night by her grandmother. He prepares a table before me in the presence of my enemies. But here there were no enemies, only the vast hush of creation. And yet something within her stirred, an expectation. Hours passed, maybe more. Time did not press here. Then as she crested a gentle hill of sand, she saw it. A single table stood in the middle of the desert, long and wooden, though no carpenter had built it recently. Its legs were worn but steady, and the surface was laid with fruits and bread, bowls of honey and oil, pitchers of clear water and golden wine. Candles burned, though there was no wind. A linen cloth fluttered at the edges, clean as morning light. She approached slowly, unsure if this was real. Then she saw him. The figure was already seated at the head of the table, the same one from her dreams, the one clothed in light. His eyes met hers, not with grandeur, but with kindness deep as the sea. Eliora, he said, just her name. But it was everything. She sat across from him. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the bread, and he nodded gently. Eat. She did, and the taste was unlike anything she had known. Not sweet nor savory, but whole, like truth made edible. Her eyes filled with tears. Why here, she whispered. Why a table in the wilderness? Because even here, he said, especially here, you must be reminded. You are not forgotten. I do not only wait at the mountaintop or behind stone walls, I meet you in the empty places too. She looked around. The desert no longer felt barren. Every grain of sand glimmered with something holy. Her weariness, the dust on her feet, the ache in her heart, it all made sense here. He poured her a cup and held it out. To the journey, he said. She took it. To the shepherd who walks beside me. They drank. For a long time, no words passed between them, but silence was no longer lonely. It was presence, communion. Finally, he stood and placed his hand upon her head. There is more ahead, shadows and sunrise, but this table will remain. In every wilderness, remember, I am here. And with that, he was gone. But the table remained, always would. And Eliora, heart full, stepped once more into the path before her, nourished, strengthened, and never alone. The path grew narrow as Eliora walked on, winding between rocks that jutted from the ground like ancient bones. The air shifted, cooler now, quieter. The sun dipped low behind the hills, casting long shadows that danced like old spirits across the earth. She felt no fear, only reverence, as though something sacred waited just ahead. Soon she saw it, a cave carved into the mountainside. Its mouth was wide and dark, wrapped in vines and mystery. And yet something in her heart leapt with recognition, like she had known this place long before her feet found it. She stepped inside. The darkness welcomed her, not as a threat, but as a veil. Her eyes adjusted slowly. Stone walls breathed with silence, ancient and deep. Drops of water fell from the ceiling in soft rhythm, like a heartbeat. And then she realized, it wasn't the cave that was dark. It was the space within herself that echoed. The cave was not a place outside. It was a mirror of the heart. Eliora sat upon the ground, pulling her shawl close. In this holy hush, memories began to surface. Her childhood laughter beneath fig trees. Her father's voice singing psalms by the fire. The moment she first felt truly alone. Tears came, not from sorrow, but recognition. She did not run from them. She let them fall, like rain upon parched earth. In the cave of her heart, she made peace with what had been. Then from somewhere within, a soft light began to glow. Not from a torch or candle, but from the very center of the stone chamber. She stood and walked toward it. There, on a small ledge carved into the wall, lay a single flame in a bowl of oil. It had no match, no spark. It simply was. And beside it, inscribed in the stone, were the words, "The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." Eliora wept again, but this time from joy. She reached out her hands toward the flame, not to take it, but to feel its warmth. As she did, her heart burned, not with pain, but with presence, as if God Himself had kindled something in her that could never be put out. The shadows no longer frightened her. They were part of the dance. For what is light without the knowing of night? She stayed in the cave until the stars called her outside, and when she stepped back into the cool night air, she felt lighter, not because her burdens were gone, but because she had found where to lay them. The cave behind her stood silent, a cathedral carved by time, but the flame within her now walked with her, a sacred ember glowing gently in the cave of her heart. The days grew warmer as Eliora journeyed onward, each sunrise painting the world in gold, as though heaven gently pulled back the veil each morning to whisper, "I am here." The path curved now toward higher ground. Her steps, though slow, were sure, carried not just by her feet, but by the flame that now burned steadily within her. She reached the foot of a mountain as dusk fell. It was tall and quiet, its peak hidden by clouds, as though it touched the very hem of heaven. Shepherds in the village once called it the Mountain of Prayer, a place where the veil between earth and eternity thinned, and the soul could breathe heaven's air. Eliora looked up and placed her hand over her heart. "Lead me," she whispered, "not only to the summit, but into the stillness of you." The climb began at dawn. The path was steep and narrow, winding between thickets of cedar and juniper. At times, a stone shifted beneath her feet, and the climb tested her breath and strength. But with each step, she whispered ancient psalms under her breath, letting them rise like incense. "I lift up my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth." Her prayers did not come with many words now. They were not pleas or performances. They were offerings, silent, simple, shaped like sighs. Hours passed. The sun reached its peak and began to fall again. As the final stretch opened before her, Eliora paused. The summit was just ahead, a wide space of smooth stone kissed by clouds. Her heart quickened, not with fear, but with awe. When she reached it, she stood alone beneath the vast sky. The wind wrapped around her like a robe, and the silence was deep, yet not empty. It was alive, full of presence. She knelt upon the stone, lifted her face toward the heavens, and opened her hands. And then she prayed, not with words, but with her entire being. Her soul bowed, her mind rested. Her heart, once heavy with longing, felt light, anchored not in what she lacked, but in the one who was always with her. As night fell, stars unfolded above like 1,000 watching eyes, gentle and eternal. She lay back on the stone and listened. The mountain sang in its own way, not with sound, but with stillness. And in that stillness, she heard Him. "Be still and know that I am God." Tears filled her eyes and she let them fall freely. She was not empty anymore. She was full of Him. As sleep found her under the starlit canopy, the mountain held her like a sanctuary. And in her dreams, she saw the sky open, not with thunder or fear, but with soft light. And from that light, a hand reached toward her heart and touched it. And peace, true peace, filled every corner of her being. Morning light crept over the mountain ridge, warm and golden like oil poured gently over stone. Eliora stirred from her sleep, her body still resting on the summit, but her spirit, oh, her spirit, had gone somewhere deeper, somewhere holier in the night. She sat up slowly, wrapping her shawl tightly around her shoulders. A gentle breeze caressed her face like the hand of a mother brushing hair from her child's brow. There was no rush in her movements. Time itself seemed to slow in reverence to the sacred hush that still lingered from her dream. She rose and began her descent, not downward into the world as it had been, but forward into a world that felt reborn. Each step felt lighter. Her heart no longer pulled her in different directions. It beat with a new rhythm, one tuned to the still voice she now knew by heart. At the foot of the mountain, the path stretched forward and turned toward a meadow Eliora had never seen before. It shimmered in the morning light. The grass waved gently as if bowing, and flowers opened their petals wide, not to show their beauty, but to receive the sun. There, tucked between the trees like a secret, stood a wooden gate. Weathered by time, it leaned slightly to one side, covered in climbing roses and vines. It bore no lock, only a small inscription carved in quiet grace. "Enter, beloved. You are known here." Eliora stepped forward, her breath caught somewhere between wonder and worship. Her fingers touched the worn wood, and as she pushed the gate open, a fragrance rose to greet her. Lavender, myrrh, and something she could only describe as home. Beyond the gate lay a garden, vast and wild with life. Streams wove through the greenery like veins of silver. Trees bowed with fruit, and flowers spilled their colors like hymns on the wind. It was not tidy, not planned. It was free, and yet every part of it knew its place. Every leaf, every blade of grass, every whispering breeze seemed to sing in harmony. She walked slowly through the garden, her hands brushing the edges of rosemary and sage. Birds trilled above her, and somewhere in the distance, she heard the sound of a harp, faint but real, as though the earth itself was playing a lullaby for heaven. And in the heart of the garden, there was a tree, tall and strong, its leaves glowing with a gold not of this world. Beneath it sat a bench, carved of olive wood and smooth with age. Eliora approached and sat. Her soul breathed. Then she saw him, not with her eyes, not as she had seen other people, but with her whole being. He stood beside her, clothed not in robes but in light, and she knew him without needing to ask his name. Her heart whispered, "Abba." And he smiled as though he had waited for her every day of her life. She wept, not because she was sad, but because every piece of her had finally returned to its source. No more striving, no more fear, just presence. He reached out, not to speak, not to explain, but simply to be with her. And as they sat in the shade of the golden tree, Eliora felt it again. The deep, still peace that passes all understanding. A Sabbath for the soul, a sanctuary not made by hands. She did not ask how long she would stay. Time no longer mattered. She was where she was meant to be. The hours in the garden flowed like honey, slow, golden, and sweet. Eliora did not measure the time by the sun's arc, but by the deepening peace that settled in her chest like a gentle tide. Every breath she took was full of quiet, every exhale a release of the life she once lived in, unrest. Beside the golden tree she rested. Sometimes she sat in silence. Sometimes she sang without words. Her voice, like a child's lullaby, rose and fell with the rhythm of grace. She no longer needed to pray with effort. Her being itself had become a prayer. Then one morning, the one who sat beside her rose. He turned toward her, not with urgency, but with invitation. "Come," he said gently, "let me show you the rivers." Eliora followed him through the garden. Flowers bent slightly as he passed, as if in reverence. The air grew cooler, not cold, but crisp, like the edge of a new beginning. In the distance, the sound of water grew louder, clearer, like the laughter of something eternal. They came to a hill that overlooked a vast valley, and there, winding like silver ribbons through the land, were the rivers. They shone beneath the sun as if lit from within. Some flowed calmly, others surged with purpose, but all met at the heart of the valley, where they joined and disappeared into a lake of such stillness, it reflected the sky in perfect mirror. "These are the rivers of mercy," the light bearer said, his voice as deep as the waters below. "They come from the throne of grace and flow into every thirsty place." Eliora looked down and saw something that made her fall to her knees. The rivers didn't only flow across the land, they flowed through time, through broken hearts, through grieving mothers, through war-torn villages, through lonely hospital rooms and forgotten prison cells. She saw her own past there too. Her fears, her tears, the dark nights when she believed herself utterly alone, and she saw it all touched by the water. Every sorrow, every wound, every empty place was kissed by mercy. Tears streamed down her face, not in despair, but in reverence. These waters did not erase pain. They redeemed it. Every scar was turned into a doorway. Every ache became a wellspring. "You never left us," she whispered. "I couldn't," he replied. Eliora turned to him, her heart laid bare. "But why the pain? Why the silence for so long?" The light in his eyes softened. "Because love does not force its way. It waits, it whispers, and in the waiting, you became ready to receive what cannot be taken, only given." She nodded slowly. There were no more arguments left in her soul. Only awe. "May I touch the river?" she asked. He smiled. "It already flows through you." At that moment she felt it, rushing beneath her skin, in her heartbeat, in her breath. The mercy was not just around her, it was in her. She was a vessel, and the river would flow wherever she walked, bringing life, restoration, and peace. He placed his hand over her heart. "You are my stream in the world. Wherever you go, rivers will follow." The wind rose around them, singing soft hymns in languages only the soul could understand. And Eliora, once weary and lost, stood tall upon that hill, not just a shepherdess, not only a dreamer, but now a carrier of mercy. She turned back toward the garden, where the gate still stood open behind her, and walked forward, knowing her journey was only just beginning. The morning mist wrapped around Eliora like a shawl of heaven as she stepped beyond the garden's gate. Behind her, the golden leaves still shimmered in the light, but she no longer feared losing their glow. What had once seemed like a sacred destination now revealed itself as the beginning of a calling. She walked slowly at first, careful not to disturb the stillness within her. Her feet touched the path, but her spirit floated just above it, as though carried by the same mercy that had flowed through the valley's rivers. The world she returned to had not changed, but she had. The village rooftops came into view, small clay homes nestled like birds in a nest. From a distance, all seemed as she remembered. The smoke from morning fires, the braying of donkeys, the cry of a newborn in the arms of a mother. Yet beneath the ordinary, Eliora saw the unseen. She saw the aching and tired eyes, the questions behind every silence, the silent prayers sewn into the fabric of everyday life. She had once felt alone in her longing. Now she understood. Everyone was reaching for something eternal. Eliora's first steps brought her to the home of a widow named Myra. The old woman had buried a son in the last year, and though she still swept her doorstep each morning, her eyes were hollow, her laughter long gone. Eliora didn't speak right away. She simply knelt and touched Myra's hand. From that simple gesture, something passed between them. Not a miracle of fire, but a gentle, warming stream. The widow trembled. A tear fell. "I've missed him," Myra whispered. "I know," Eliora said. "The river knows too." They sat together in the sun, saying little. By the time Eliora rose to leave, Myra was humming softly, a lullaby she used to sing when her son was a child. Eliora walked on. The next was a shepherd boy, plagued by nightmares after seeing wolves take one of his lambs. His father had tried sternness. The village healer had tried herbs. Eliora sat with him beneath the olive tree outside his home. She told him a story, not of wolves, but of a lion who guarded his flock with light in his eyes and fire in his breath. A lion who chased every shadow, who never lost a single lamb. As the boy drifted to sleep, Eliora placed her hand upon his brow. "Peace, little one," she whispered. "You are not alone in the night." And he slept without fear. Every step Eliora took brought healing, not because she carried power in her own hands, but because she carried presence. The one who walked with her in the garden walked with her still. His voice, though quiet, was constant. His comfort, like breath, unseen but sustaining. One evening, she returned to the hill where the rivers of mercy flowed. She knelt in the tall grass and looked out across the land. Her spirit was full. "Why me?" she asked the wind. "I was only ever a restless girl, chasing peace." And the voice came, steady as the stars, sure as the sea. "Because you did not stop seeking, and now others will find, because you did." Tears ran silently down her cheeks, not of sorrow but of knowing. She had become the answer to her own longing, not by her strength but by surrender, not by striving but by resting in love. The healing path was not a road she traveled alone. It was a stream she carried with her, and as long as she walked, it would flow. Behind her in the village, lights began to glow in windows. Fires flickered. Children laughed. And in the distance, a widow sang. The moon had risen high over the village, casting a pale silver over the rooftops and fields. When Eliora felt the tug once more, not of burden, but of beckoning. It was not the wind that called her this time, but light, a soft, pulsing glow that rose from the hills like a candle in the night. She followed it, past the olive groves, through the whispering reeds along the river's edge. Her feet found the path without effort. It was as though something within her had walked it before. With every step, the glow grew stronger, not blinding but warm, like the flame of a lamp held in a loving hand. At last, she came to a small clearing encircled by cypress trees. In the center stood a humble cottage made of stone and wood, its windows alight with a golden radiance. No smoke curled from the chimney, and no footsteps echoed on the ground. Yet the place felt alive, pulsing with quiet joy. Eliora approached the door, and before she could knock, it opened. An old man stood in the threshold, his beard white as wool, his eyes clear as morning. He wore no crown, but he carried the weight of ages in his posture, like one who had watched many winters pass, yet never grown cold. "Come in, child," he said, with a voice like distant thunder wrapped in honey. "The light told me you were coming." Eliora stepped inside. The cottage was simple: a table, 2 chairs, a shelf of old scrolls, and dozens of lanterns, each one glowing gently, suspended in the air or resting on shelves and sills. No fire burned in the hearth, yet the room was warm, filled with the scent of cedar and bread. "Who are you?" Eliora asked, not in fear but wonder. "I am the keeper of light," he said, "but not its source. I tend it, as one tends a garden. The light belongs to the one who called you." Eliora's heart stirred. She had felt that light, in the garden, in the dreams, in the silence. Now it danced around her like stars made small. The old man took a lantern from the wall and handed it to her. Inside, the flame glowed steady, unwavering. "This one is yours," he said. Eliora cradled it in her hands. "But I don't understand. I have no fire of my own." He smiled, eyes twinkling. "None of us do. The flame is not earned, it is gifted. It lights the way, not just for you, but for those who walk beside you in the dark." She looked into the flame. It flickered gently, reflecting her eyes. As she watched, it revealed memories of the garden, of the widow's healing tear, of the boy who finally slept. The flame held their peace like treasure. "This light remembers," she whispered. "It does," the old man said, "and it guides, but it must be carried with humility. The brighter the flame, the gentler the hand." Eliora nodded. "What do I do with it?" "You walk," he said simply. "You walk with it, through valleys, over hills, into homes and hearts that have long forgotten what hope feels like. Let the light speak. You need only hold it close." And then, with a gesture, he opened a second door, a back entrance to the cottage. Beyond it, a winding path shimmered beneath the moonlight, curving toward a distant village she did not recognize. Her heart beat slowly, rhythmically, not with fear, but with a new strength. She turned to thank him, but the old man had vanished. Only the lanterns remained, flickering in time with her breath. Eliora stepped into the night. The lantern in her hand did not burn like fire, but like grace, soft, constant, eternal. As she walked, shadows parted. The wind hushed. Even the stars seemed to lean in, and from the silence came the echo of a promise. "You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden." The morning mist lay low across the earth, cloaking the path in a soft silver veil as Eliora descended into the valley. The lantern she carried glowed steadily in her hand, its light undisturbed by fog or breeze. The valley below was quiet, more than quiet. It was still, as though time itself held its breath within these gentle hills. The trees here grew taller, older. Their trunks bore the marks of seasons long past, and their branches bowed as if in reverence. As Eliora walked, the path opened into a wide field dotted with stones, each one smooth, round, and inscribed with a single word. She bent to read one: mercy, another, loss, and another still: forgiven. The valley was filled with them, stones resting like memories upon the earth. each one carrying the weight of a life, a sorrow, a healing, a moment remembered. As she passed, the lantern's light caused the inscriptions to shimmer, and she knew this was not a place of mourning, but of memory. Ahead stood a tree unlike any she had ever seen. It had no leaves, only silver bark that gleamed softly in the morning haze. Its roots reached into the earth like hands folded in prayer. Beneath its branches sat a woman, robed in linen white, her hair silver and eyes deep with knowing. She did not look up as Eliora approached, only gestured for her to sit. "This place feels holy," Eliora whispered. "It is," the woman replied. "This is the valley where the past rests, not to bind, but to bless." Eliora looked around again. "Why are there so many stones?" "Because every soul who journeys to the garden must pass through here," the woman said. "And every soul carries memories, some heavy, some sacred. Here they are laid down, not forgotten, honored." She placed her hand upon a stone marked grief. The word glowed under her touch. "To remember," she said gently, "is not to be imprisoned. It is to be reminded of what was carried and what was overcome." Eliora thought of her own memories, the restless nights, the tear-stained prayers, the dreams of emptiness. They had led her here. They had shaped the longing in her soul, but they no longer ruled her. "I have memories too," Eliora said. "Should I leave them here?" The woman nodded. "If they are ready, if you are ready, lay them down and let the light hold them." Eliora knelt in the grass, lantern before her. One by one she named them, not out loud but in the silence of her heart. The ache of loneliness, the sorrow of loss, the fear of never being whole. Each one, as she named it, formed into a stone in her hands, light, smooth, warm to the touch. She placed them gently in the field, each marked with the truth she had found through them. Loved, carried, seen. When she finished, the air felt lighter. She stood and the woman smiled. "You are not empty," the woman said. "You are made more whole. The past is now a path, not a prison." Eliora bowed her head. "Thank you." The woman touched the lantern in Eliora's hand. Its flame grew a little brighter. "Remember," she said, "the light is not only for the road ahead, it illuminates what is behind so that nothing is wasted." As Eliora turned to leave the valley, the stones shimmered one last time. The mist began to lift, revealing the next bend in the path. Birds began to sing, their voices light and clear, like prayers set to music. And as she walked forward, she felt the presence of those memories, not as burdens but as companions, not chaining her but blessing her steps. She did not look back, but in her spirit she knew the valley would always remain, quiet and sacred, a testament to the journey already walked. And above all, she heard a whisper, gentle, true, "Behold, I make all things new." The valley faded into memory behind her, and the path began to rise. Slowly at first, then more steeply, until it coiled like a ribbon around the shoulder of a towering mountain. The air here was thinner, cleaner, and sharp with the scent of pine and stone. The silence was profound, not empty, but full of presence, full of something holy. Eliora climbed in quiet reverence. There were no birds here, no rustling of leaves. Even the wind was hushed, as though the mountain itself commanded stillness. Each step brought her higher, and with each step, a deeper quiet settled into her soul. The lantern in her hand glowed softly, though there was no darkness to push back, only an invitation to listen. At last, the path leveled out. Before her stretched a wide plateau ringed with ancient stones. At the center stood a simple altar made of uncut rock, weathered by years and rain, and around it, nothing but silence. Eliora stepped forward, drawn not by sight, but by a quiet beckoning deep within. She knelt beside the altar. There were no visions, no thunderclaps, no voice called her name. And yet, she knew. She knew she was not alone. Tears welled in her eyes, not of sorrow, but of awe. This silence was not absence. It was fullness. It was peace, the kind that passed understanding, the kind that healed without words. It reached into every hidden corner of her soul, places even she had not dared enter. and filled them with stillness like soft rain on parched earth. She breathed in, slow and deep. The silence spoke, not in language, but in presence. Be still and know that I am God. Eliora closed her eyes. Here there were no more questions. No need for answers, no striving, no seeking, just being. She didn't know how long she sat there. Time ceased to matter. All that remained was now, the eternal now. Eventually she rose, lighter than when she came. The silence remained within her, a sanctuary she would carry always. As she turned to descend the mountain, a single white feather drifted from the sky and landed at her feet. She picked it up and tucked it into her robe, a sign perhaps, a reminder that she had been seen, that the silence was not empty, but inhabited by love itself. And though her feet would once again meet the dust of the road, her soul would walk forever in the stillness of that mountain. The descent from the mountain brought Eliora into a glade that shimmered beneath a night sky brushed with galaxies. She had not realized how far the sun had slipped behind the hills, but there was no fear in her heart, only wonder. The air was warm, touched by a fragrance she could not name, something between rose and myrrh. And there in the clearing was a long table dressed in linen as white as morning light. It stretched wider than it should have been possible, and on it lay fruits of every color, loaves of bread still steaming, cups of gold filled with honeyed drink. Candles flickered at every place, though there was no hand to light them. Eliora stepped forward, breath caught in her throat. For a moment she feared she was unworthy. Her robes were dusty, her sandals worn. But as she moved closer, she saw that every place at the table bore a name, and one of them was hers. Tears welled in her eyes as she took her seat. Across from her, an old man with kind eyes nodded. Beside her, a young child laughed softly. Further down the table sat shepherds, mothers, strangers she had never known but somehow recognized. Their faces shone, not with glory, but with belonging. Then he came. Clothed in light, robed in simplicity, he walked among them without grandeur. Yet all creation seemed to bow as he passed. He took no throne, he took no head of the table, he simply served. To each guest he offered bread with hands that bore scars of love. To each a cup, filled until it overflowed. When he reached Eliora, he looked into her soul, not to judge, but to see her, truly see her. "You are welcome here," he said, voice like the wind that once called her name. "Not because you are perfect, but because you are mine." Her heart broke open in gratitude. As the meal unfolded, laughter rose like birdsong. Stories were shared without shame. No one guarded their hearts. There was no need. It was a place where the weary were fed, where the wounded were held, where the forgotten were remembered. Eliora had never tasted food so sweet, nor drink so warming. But more than the feast, it was the presence that nourished her, of those around her, and of the one who moved among them like light on water. When the meal ended, the table did not empty. No one rushed away. They stayed, singing, sharing, resting. And above them the stars seemed to bend closer, as if heaven leaned in to listen. That night, Eliora curled beneath a tree beside the table, surrounded by peace and gentle voices. The grass was her pillow, and the sky her blanket. And as sleep gently claimed her, she heard once more the whisper that had begun her journey. "Surely goodness and mercy shall follow you all the days of your life, and you shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever." And she believed it. Eliora awoke to the hush of dawn. The great banquet table had vanished like a dream that lingers just behind the veil of sleep, but the warmth of love and belonging still rested in her bones. Around her, the clearing glowed with the soft breath of morning, and dew glistened like tiny stars scattered across the earth. Before her stretched a narrow path, veiled in mist. Though it was unfamiliar, she felt no fear. The peace from the banquet still cradled her spirit, and the voice that once called her name whispered again, "Walk with me." She obeyed. The path led her to a river unlike any she had ever seen. It flowed slowly, gracefully, its waters so clear that she could see the stones beneath, smooth, round, shimmering like ancient jewels. Along its banks bloomed lilies and fig trees, their leaves swaying gently as if in silent praise. As she knelt beside the water, a strange and holy stillness came over her. Then in the ripples, memories began to appear, not like thoughts in her mind, but visions in the river itself. She saw herself as a child, laughing beneath fig branches, her mother's hands weaving baskets, her father's gentle voice humming old psalms in the twilight. She saw moments she had forgotten, tiny blessings, glimmers of grace, now returned to her as if the river carried not water, but time itself. Tears slipped down her cheeks. "Why do you cry?" asked the voice, tender and near. "I had forgotten how much you've loved me all along," she whispered, "even when I didn't see." And the river, in its quiet wisdom, flowed on. It showed her not only joy but sorrow, nights of loneliness, prayers that had felt unanswered, losses she still carried. Yet each wound glimmered with a strange light, as if heaven had wept with her and marked each pain with gold. Eliora dipped her fingers into the water. The moment she touched it, she felt the memories soak into her, into the very marrow of her being. Not to burden her, but to remind her. Nothing had been wasted. Every step, every tear, had been held in the hands of the one who sees. Then the voice spoke again. "Fear not. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. What was broken will be healed. What was lost will be found. Come and drink deeply." Eliora cupped her hands and drank. The water was cool and sweet, but more than that, it filled the hollow spaces in her soul. Where longing had lived, peace now settled. Where regret had whispered, hope now sang. She sat beside the river for a long time, letting it wash over her spirit. Birds sang in the branches above. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine and light. She felt no need to move, no rush to leave. It was enough to be. When at last she rose, her feet felt lighter, as though the river had cleansed not only her soul, but her very journey. The path before her shimmered in the morning sun, and the voice whispered once more, "Remember, beloved, I have carried you every step of the way." And with that, Eliora turned toward the light and walked on. The path from the river curved gently into a quiet valley, embraced by hills that seemed to hum with an ancient lullaby. Eliora's heart was full, yet soft, like the earth after rainfall, open, tender, and listening. The voice had been silent since the river, but its presence never left her. It lingered in every breeze, in the rustle of grass, in the warm hush of her spirit. As she stepped deeper into the valley, she saw it, a strange and beautiful place, like a garden, but unlike any garden she had known. It was not filled with blossoms or vines. No fruit trees stood in rows, and no fragrance rose from flowered beds. Instead, the ground was scattered with broken stones. Some were small, like shattered pebbles. Others were large and jagged. All of them were etched with markings, lines and symbols worn smooth by wind and time. Some bore names, others held prayers. Eliora approached the nearest one and ran her hand across its surface. The stone was cracked down the middle, but within the crack grew something soft and green, a sprig of olive, tender and new. And then she understood. This was not a graveyard. It was a garden of grief, tended by unseen hands. Every stone was a sorrow, every fracture a story. Every plant growing through the cracks was proof that the pain had not been forgotten. It had been transformed. Kneeling, Eliora felt her breath slow. She remembered her own brokenness, the nights of aching silence, the fear she carried for years, the loss of her mother, the shame she never voiced. She touched a stone that seemed to pulse beneath her fingertips, as if it recognized her sorrow and welcomed it. And then the voice returned. "This is holy ground, not because it is perfect, but because it has been loved." She bowed her head. "Why do you show me this?" she whispered. "Because you must know that brokenness does not disqualify you. It prepares you. The wounds you carry are not barriers. They are doors. Through them, light will enter. Through them, others will find their way." Eliora wept, not in despair, but in reverence. She saw now what she had once feared to look at. Her pain had been sacred. Her scars were not signs of weakness, but of survival, of resurrection. She rose slowly and walked deeper into the garden. There in the center stood a great stone altar, Upon it, a single lamp burned with a golden flame. Around it grew vines bearing fruit, figs, pomegranates, grapes, lush and full of promise. The voice spoke once more, "Bring your broken stones to me, lay them here, and I will make them a foundation." With trembling hands, Eliora gathered the stones of her past, memories, regrets, longings she could never voice, and placed them one by one upon the altar. As she did, she felt each weight lift, and in its place a hush of peace descended. The flame danced higher, the air shimmered, and then she heard the song. It came not from without, but within, a melody older than time, tender as the womb, steady as the heartbeat of God. It sang of mercy, of beginnings, of a love that remembered every fragment and called it beautiful. Eliora stood in that sacred place for a long time, letting the music fill her. And when she finally turned to go, the altar behind her remained, glowing, radiant, eternal. She did not look back. She did not need to. Her past was not a shadow anymore. It was soil. It was seed. It was sacred. Morning came as a soft unveiling, light seeping gently into the valley, casting long golden beams across the grass. The garden of the broken stones shimmered behind Eliora like a dream both remembered and lived. She turned her face toward the hills where a quiet path ascended toward the horizon. There was something waiting there. She felt it in her spirit, like a beckoning whisper just out of reach. And so, with a heart cleansed by surrender, she began the climb. The path wound through olive groves and cypress trees, their branches swaying like worshipers in prayer. Every step felt guided. She no longer feared the silence between the whispers. It was no longer emptiness, but sacred space. At the top of the hill, a wall stood, a tall structure made of stone and cedar. It was ancient but strong, built not for war, but for watching. It stretched in both directions, guarding a city unseen. And at the center of it, a man stood. He was robed in white, and though his face was lined with years, his eyes held the steady light of one who had seen many nights and still believed in dawn. Eliora approached slowly. The man turned to her and smiled. "You've come far," he said, his voice like wind over water. "I have," she replied, "but I don't know where I'm going." "You're not lost," he said. "You're being led." She looked at the wall. "Are you the watchman?" "I am one of many," he said. "We are set here not to guard against danger, but to see what is coming. We watch for the light. We call it out when it rises." "And if it takes too long?" she asked. He smiled gently. "Then we wait, faithfully, for the light always comes." He placed his hand on the stone beside him. These walls were not built to keep people out. They were built to remind us that the sacred is worth waiting for. That hope is not passive, it is standing watch, even in the dark. Eliora gazed beyond the wall. In the distance, the horizon glowed with the soft blush of dawn. The watchman continued, "There will be times when you feel like you've been forgotten, like your prayers are swallowed by silence. But every whisper is heard, every tear is counted." He looked at her with compassion that ran deep as wells. "You carry more than your own light now. You carry the light for others. That is why you've walked through valleys, why you wept at the altar. You are a bearer of dawn." Eliora's breath caught in her chest. "How can I carry such a thing?" "You don't carry it," he said. "You let it carry you." Then reaching into his robe, the watchman pulled out a lantern, simple, made of clay, but burning with a steady flame. He placed it in her hands. "Wherever your journey takes you next," he said, "let this remind you, you are never walking alone. And your light, no matter how small, is seen." She held the lantern close, warmth blooming in her chest. Below the wall, the path continued, this time into a plain of wildflowers and rivers that shimmered like glass. Eliora turned to thank the watchman, but he was already facing the horizon, eyes lifted, waiting for the light again. And so she stepped down from the wall, lantern in hand, heart at peace. She no longer feared the path. She was part of its light. The path from the wall sloped gently downward into a meadow veiled in morning mist. Wildflowers bloomed like forgotten hymns, each one holding a color older than words. The lantern Eliora carried cast a warm glow, Though the dawn had risen, it was no longer just a guide, it was a companion. Ahead, the sound of water grew louder, not hurried like a mountain stream, but slow, deep, and knowing. It was the kind of sound that quiets thoughts, as if the earth itself were breathing. At the meadow's edge, she saw it, a wide river, winding gently through the valley like a ribbon of silver silk. It moved with such calm authority, as though it had never rushed, never strayed. And along its banks grew trees of every kind, their leaves whispering in a language older than speech. She approached the water's edge and knelt. The river was clear, but not empty. Within its depths were glimmers of memory, echoes of lives once lived, of tears shed and laughter spilled. Faces shimmered in the currents, and voices too soft to be heard seemed to hum beneath its flow. A voice, not her own, rose gently in her soul. Before you were formed, I knew you. Before you wandered, I was waiting. Tears welled in Eliora's eyes, not from pain, but from the overwhelming sense of being known. This river, this holy stream, had seen her long before she had known herself. Every step, every stumble, every sleepless night, it had remembered. She cupped her hands and drew water to her lips. It tasted like purity and promise, like rain and grace. As she drank, her memories stirred, not the aching ones, but those washed clean by mercy, her father's laughter, her mother's lullabies. The first time she believed the stars were watching her, and the day she first heard the wind call her name. The river shimmered more brightly now, as if it rejoiced in being remembered too. She sat by its edge for what felt like hours, or maybe minutes. Time moved differently here, and when she finally rose, she felt lighter, as though the river had carried away what she no longer needed to hold. On the far bank, a narrow bridge arched delicately across the water. Made of stone and covered in ivy, it beckoned her forward, not as a demand, but as an invitation. Before crossing, she turned back. "Thank you," she whispered, voice cracking. The river responded with a breeze that danced across its surface, as if nodding in return. As she stepped onto the bridge, lantern in hand, her spirit quieted again. The journey was not over, but it had changed. She was no longer walking to escape her past. She was walking because the path was sacred, and the river behind her whispered one last time, "You are remembered, always." The bridge gave way to a narrow path, cloaked in dew and lit by the tender hush of morning. Each step Eliora took felt lighter than the last, not as though the ground had changed, but because she had. The burdens she had carried, sleepless nights, aching questions, the echoes of loss, were now behind her, woven into the fabric of her journey, but no longer weighing her down. Ahead, the mist parted like a veil drawn back by invisible hands, and there it was, the garden. It was not grand in the way palaces are grand, but in the way stillness is grand, the way peace fills a soul and becomes more vast than any empire. Trees arched above like a cathedral, branches brushing heaven with golden leaves. Flowers bloomed in every hue of grace, and the air was fragrant with a holiness she could not name. And at the center of the garden was a pool, still as glass. Its waters did not ripple unless touched by the wind, and even then, they moved with reverence. All around it, stones were placed in a circle, smooth and warm, as though many had sat here before. Above the water grew a tree, tall, strong, its roots descending beneath the earth like prayer. Its fruit glowed softly, not with sunlight, but from within. She stepped closer and saw her reflection, not as she once feared to see it, marked by weariness, but whole. Her eyes were bright with a quiet joy. Her face was softened by love. She was no longer searching for home. She was home. A voice, gentle and deep, rose behind her like the dawn. "You have come through fire and shadow, and you have not been consumed. You followed the whisper, and it led you here. Welcome, beloved." She turned, and there he stood, the figure from her dreams, clothed not in grandeur, but in light. His eyes held eternity, and yet looked at her as if she were the only one who mattered. She fell to her knees, not in fear, but in awe. He reached out, lifting her gently. "You are mine," he said, "and you were always meant to be." Tears traced her cheeks as she leaned into his embrace. It was like being wrapped in every sunrise, every answered prayer, every moment of grace she had ever longed for. The garden shimmered around them, and a soft melody filled the air, not sung by voice, but by creation itself. The wind, the leaves, the still waters, all joined in a hymn of peace. She stayed there, held and holding, and time no longer mattered. Later, she would rest beneath the tree, its shade a blanket of calm. She would eat of its fruit and feel joy fill every corner of her being. She would sleep, deep, healing sleep, and dream only of beauty. And when she woke, the whispering wind would still be there. It would speak not of journey's end, but of a new beginning. Because peace is not a place one finds only once. It is a garden within, watered by love, guarded by truth, and blooming forever under the light of the one who waits for all wanderers to come home.